Keanu Reeves walked into a fancy restaurant in the heart of the city, dressed in simple, wrinkled clothes as though he'd just come from a regular day. He moved with a quiet presence, choosing a discreet table, hoping to blend in with the elegant crowd. The glow from crystal chandeliers above illuminated the luxurious space around him. However, before he could even place an order, a waitress named Jessica approached him, her posture rigid and filled with an air of arrogance. "Are you sure you can afford to be here?" she asked, her tone sharp and sarcastic, loud enough for others to hear. Patrons at nearby tables turned their heads, curious about what might happen next. Keanu's calm demeanor surprised her. He simply smiled slightly, unfazed. "I'd like a table, please." Jessica's eyes narrowed, and she tilted her head as if trying to decide how to handle him. "Are you sure you're in the right place? This is a very exclusive restaurant." Without missing a beat, Keanu nodded, still composed. "Yes, this is the place." Jessica scoffed under her breath, rolling her eyes. "Okay, just a moment. I need to check something." She turned abruptly and walked away, heading to the reception desk, her high heels clicking on the marble floor. She accessed the reservation system and typed his name with exaggerated flair, waiting for results. When nothing came up, she returned, visibly annoyed. "Well, as I suspected, you don't have a reservation," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "We do have a few tables available, but just so you know, this isn't a casual dining spot." Keanu remained calm, his smile unwavering. "I'd like to dine here." Jessica let out a loud, exasperated sigh. She grabbed a menu with an exaggerated motion, waving it in the air as if dealing with someone beneath her notice. "All right, but I'll need to seat you in a suitable area." Without looking back to see if he was following, she walked briskly through the dining room, leading him to the farthest, least appealing corner of the restaurant, a table hidden near the kitchen. The sound of dishes being washed and muffled voices from the staff created an atmosphere far removed from the rest of the dining room. Jessica dropped the menu on the table with a loud thud. "Here you go. This table is perfect for you," she said in a falsely sweet tone. "If you need anything, let me know, but only if it's necessary, okay?" Keanu's slight smile remained, seemingly unbothered by her attitude. "Thank you. I'm sure this will be an interesting experience." Jessica muttered something under her breath and walked away, confident that she'd dealt with him effectively. But Keanu didn't leave. Instead, he opened the menu and began to read it slowly, taking his time. Jessica, across the room, couldn't hide her disbelief. She watched him from afar, certain he'd leave as soon as he saw the prices or realized he didn't fit in. She leaned into a coworker and whispered loudly enough for others to hear, "He won't last 5 minutes here. Bet he'll ask for the check as soon as he opens the menu." Keanu, however, remained calm and focused on the food choices. He showed no signs of rushing or discomfort. Jessica returned to the table to take his order. She leaned forward slightly, pulling out her notepad with an exaggerated motion. "Have you decided what you'd like?" she asked, her voice bored and impatient. "Or do you want a recommendation?" Keanu, without hesitation, pointed to one of the most expensive main courses on the menu. "I'd like to try this one." Jessica stifled a laugh, barely able to hide her amusement. "Oh, of course. The filet de Rossini," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Just to confirm, sir, this costs $350, right?" Keanu nodded, calm and unbothered. "Yes, it sounds wonderful." Jessica tilted her head and smiled in a way that seemed fake and mean. "Just so you know, our chef prefers dishes like this to be enjoyed by those who truly appreciate fine dining. I hope it meets your expectations." She spun on her heels, but before walking away she turned back. "And one more thing, the minimum tip expected here is 20%. Keep that in mind while you enjoy." Keanu didn't flinch or seem fazed by any of it. He just sat back in his chair looking relaxed. As he waited, Jessica returned with his appetizer. She set the plate down forcefully, causing it to slide slightly across the table. "Here's your appetizer. I hope you enjoy it, or at least know what you're eating," she said with a mocking smile. Keanu looked up at her, still polite. "Thank you." Jessica leaned in slightly, her tone becoming more pointed. "You know, a lot of customers who order this dish don't like it. It's not exactly something most people would pick, but I think you'll do just fine." Keanu smiled again, calm and collected. "It looks excellent. Thank you for your attention." Jessica walked away, muttering to a coworker, "That guy won't even make it to the main course. He's going to ask for the check as soon as he sees the bill." But Keanu continued to eat his appetizer calmly, unaffected by her taunts. Across the dining room, Jessica glared at him, arms crossed, waiting for him to fail. She watched as he savored every bite, seemingly untroubled by the fancy setting, the price, or her behavior. She was sure he would realize he didn't belong and quickly leave. When the main course arrived, Jessica set it down carefully, watching closely to see if he'd react. But Keanu simply picked up his fork, cut a small piece, and began eating slowly, savoring the flavors. Jessica's face twitched slightly in frustration. She couldn't understand why he wasn't following the script she had written in her head. He wasn't begging for attention or looking flustered by the luxury around him. Instead, he simply enjoyed the food as if it was something normal, something he had earned, not something to show off. After finishing the main course, Keanu leaned back in his chair, still calm, still composed. Jessica returned, ready to deliver the bill. She leaned over slightly, trying to catch his attention, hoping for some kind of reaction. "Well," she said, raising an eyebrow. "Did you enjoy your meal?" Keanu looked at her with the same gentle smile. "It was wonderful, thank you." Jessica was momentarily taken aback. She had expected disappointment, confusion, maybe even a question about the price, but she got nothing but quiet satisfaction from him. "Well," she said after a pause, still trying to keep her sarcasm sharp, "just remember that this place isn't for everyone. It's for people who appreciate the finer things." Keanu nodded slowly. "I can see that. Thank you for the recommendation." Jessica huffed and walked away, muttering to herself again. "He's going to be the type to tip 5% just to spite me." But as she walked away, something strange happened. A few minutes later, the bill was placed on the table. And when Jessica returned to collect it, she couldn't believe her eyes. The bill was folded neatly with an envelope sitting on top. Jessica leaned in, looking down at it suspiciously. "Is everything okay with your bill?" she asked, expecting a cheeky remark or argument. But Keanu smiled slightly, his tone as calm as ever. "I believe everything was handled quite well." Jessica's eyes narrowed. Slowly, she picked up the envelope and opened it. Inside there were cash tips, 20%, plus more. More than enough to leave her speechless. Keanu watched her reaction quietly, smiling but not saying a word. Jessica's smugness had turned into astonishment. Thank you," she finally managed, unsure how to react. Keanu nodded slightly, his smile never faltering. "You're welcome." And with that, he gathered his belongings and walked out of the restaurant, leaving everyone in the dining room stunned. Jessica stood in the dining area, arms crossed tightly against her chest, watching Keanu from across the room. A smug, malicious smile began to creep across her face as she noticed him looking distracted. Her eyes narrowed as she muttered to one of her co-workers in a low, almost mocking tone, "I bet he's going to ask for tap water. These types always do." The co-worker, clearly ignoring her, quickly turned away, but Jessica's gaze didn't waver. The elderly customer at a nearby table, an older man with neatly combed white hair, wearing a crisp navy blue suit, had been watching intently. He raised his wine glass slightly and silently toasted toward Keanu, who, in turn, noticed the gesture and gave a subtle nod and a small smile in return. Dinner had only just begun, but Jessica's growing disdain wasn't going unnoticed. As she approached Keanu to take his order, she made no effort to hide her irritation. Instead of rushing straight to the kitchen, she stopped to chat with a well-dressed couple seated in the center of the dining room, laughing exaggeratedly at a joke another guest had shared. She even walked past Keanu's table several times, acting as if she was too busy with other tasks to pay him any attention. Every time he glanced in her direction, she would quickly look away, speed up her step, and act as if she had other, more important things to do. Keanu waited patiently. His expression was calm, his gaze calm yet observant. He showed no sign of impatience, no frustration, no irritation, just quiet composure. As time passed, it became clear to Jessica that her typical methods weren't working. She frowned and decided to ramp up her behavior. When she finally returned to take his order, she placed the dish under the warming lamp in the kitchen, leaving it there as she attended to other tables, completely ignoring the ready-to-serve plate. She made sure to make him wait as long as possible, strolling back and forth between tables, chatting with guests, laughing loudly, and even delivering a cocktail to a table that wasn't hers. Finally, after she deemed enough time had passed, Jessica walked back to Keanu's table and, with a brusque gesture, set the dish down in front of him. "Here's your order," she said, her tone laced with thinly veiled sarcasm. "I hope you enjoy it. Oh, and if you don't like it, please let us know. We can always adjust it to something more affordable." Her smile was dripping with irony, as if she were daring him to say something. But Keanu didn't react the way she expected. Instead, he looked up at her with the same calm expression as before, his voice steady and polite. "It looks excellent. Thank you." Jessica's brow furrowed, visibly frustrated that she couldn't provoke any complaints from him. She leaned in slightly, lowering her voice just enough so only Keanu could hear. "Are you sure? It's a very sophisticated dish. It might be a little difficult for someone who's not used to it," she added with a pointed smirk. "I'm sure," Keanu replied serenely. "Thank you for your concern." Annoyed that she couldn't get under his skin, Jessica quickly walked away, though not without muttering under her breath, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "He might be smiling now, but let's see how he feels when the bill comes." As Jessica returned to the bar, she leaned against the counter, speaking loudly to a coworker, though her comments were clearly aimed for others to hear. "He's pretending to be polite, but it's obvious he's uncomfortable. I bet he doesn't even know what he's eating. It's always the same with these types. Come in here acting important, but they end up making fools of themselves." Her coworker, visibly uncomfortable, forced a smile and tried to change the subject. But Jessica kept going, laughing quietly to herself. Nearby diners began to notice and whisper to each other. Some shook their heads, frowning at Jessica's behavior. One well-dressed woman sitting 2 tables ahead leaned into her companion and whispered, "He must be someone important to stay this calm. Anyone else would have walked out by now." The man nodded, casting a curious glance at Keanu, as if trying to figure out who he might be. Determined to escalate the situation, Jessica returned to Keanu's table with his coffee order. She spoke loudly and pointedly, enough for several tables to overhear. "I hope you're enjoying your experience," she said with a sarcastic smile. "After all, it's always interesting to have different kinds of people here. It adds a unique touch to the atmosphere." Keanu, unflinching, locked eyes with her and in a voice calm but carrying undeniable weight asked, "Different? Could you explain what you mean by that?" Jessica laughed nervously, trying to maintain her composure. "Oh, don't take it the wrong way. It's just that, well, our clientele usually has more traditional backgrounds. It's rare to see someone with your style here." The room around them fell silent. Diners paused their conversations, turning their attention to what was happening. Nearby tables, including the couple who had been observing earlier, whispered to each other, outraged at how Jessica was publicly humiliating Keanu. One woman placed her hand over her chest, murmuring, "This is outrageous. She's trying to embarrass him in public." The elderly man, still seated at another table, took a sip of his wine and muttered under his breath, "This has gone too far." Keanu, still seated quietly at his table, surveyed the room calmly, his demeanor impenetrable. He showed no signs of irritation or discomfort, which clearly unsettled Jessica even more. Her needling, her attempts at provocation, all were failing. Jessica, increasingly frustrated, knew she had to escalate. After serving Keanu his coffee, she leaned in even closer, speaking softly but loudly enough for others to hear. "It's hard to maintain standards when just anyone thinks they can walk in," she said, casting a pointed glance in Keanu's direction. "That's why we have a reservations policy. It helps us avoid situations like this." Some patrons nearby frowned, exchanging worried glances. The couple who had been watching from the beginning looked outraged. The woman whispered to her partner, "She's trying to humiliate the man in public." Back at his table, Keanu remained calm, finishing his coffee with an air of quiet confidence. He glanced around the room, noticing the sympathetic looks from other patrons, but he didn't seem the least bit bothered. Jessica returned to clear his plate, but her expression was still filled with disdain. "So, how was the dish? Did it meet your expectations?" she asked with a fake smile, trying one last time to provoke him. Keanu looked her straight in the eyes and replied, "It was excellent. Thank you. Please tell the chefs they did an impeccable job." Jessica's eyebrows shot up in surprise, her plans once again thwarted. She wasn't sure what to say next. As she walked away, muttering under her breath loudly enough to be heard, "He might be smiling now, but let's see if he still is when the bill comes." At his table, Keanu calmly continued to observe, a slight smile playing at his lips. His gaze suggested that the moment to act was getting closer. Jessica, now frustrated beyond measure, decided she had to escalate further. After bringing him his coffee, she spoke loudly enough for several nearby tables to hear. "I hope you're enjoying your experience," she said with an exaggeratedly sarcastic smile. "After all, it's always interesting to have different kinds of people here. It adds a unique touch to the atmosphere." Keanu, unflinching, locked eyes with her and in a voice calm but carrying undeniable weight asked, "Different? Could you explain what you mean by that?" Jessica laughed nervously, trying to maintain her composure. "Oh, don't take it the wrong way. It's just that, well, our clientele usually has more traditional backgrounds. It's rare to see someone with your style here. The room around them fell silent. Diners paused their conversations, turning their attention to what was happening. Nearby tables, including the couple who had been observing earlier, whispered to each other, outraged at how Jessica was publicly humiliating Keanu. One woman placed her hand over her chest, murmuring, "This is outrageous. She's trying to embarrass him in public." The elderly man, still seated at another table, took a sip of his wine and muttered under his breath, "This has gone too far." Keanu, still seated quietly at his table, surveyed the room calmly, his demeanor impenetrable. He showed no signs of irritation or discomfort, which clearly unsettled Jessica even more. Her needling, her attempts at provocation, all were failing. Jessica, increasingly frustrated, knew she had to escalate. After serving Keanu his coffee, she leaned in even closer, speaking softly but loudly enough for others to hear. "It's hard to maintain standards when just anyone thinks they can walk in," she said, casting a pointed glance in Keanu's direction. "That's why we have a reservations policy. It helps us avoid situations like this." Some patrons nearby frowned, exchanging worried glances. The couple who had been watching from the beginning looked outraged. The woman whispered to her partner, "She's trying to humiliate the man in public." Back at his table, Keanu remained calm, finishing his coffee with an air of quiet confidence. He glanced around the room, noticing the sympathetic looks from other patrons, but he didn't seem the least bit bothered. Jessica returned to clear his plate, but her expression was still filled with disdain. "So, how was the dish? Did it meet your expectations?" she asked with a fake smile, trying one last time to provoke him. Keanu looked her straight in the eyes and replied, "It was excellent. Thank you. Please tell the chefs they did an impeccable job." Jessica's eyebrows shot up in surprise, her plans once again thwarted. She wasn't sure what to say next. As she walked away, muttering under her breath loudly enough to be heard, "He might be smiling now, but let's see if he still is when the bill comes." At his table, Keanu calmly continued to observe, a slight smile playing at his lips. His gaze suggested that the moment to act was getting closer. Jessica, who thought she was in control, suddenly froze. Her mind was racing, trying to understand what was happening. "Mr. Reeves? I know him? What's going on here?" she thought nervously. Keanu looked at the manager and gave a small, reassuring smile. "Thank you, but don't worry, I'm fine. I just want to talk to your staff for a little bit. Is that okay?" The manager's face immediately grew serious, sensing something was wrong. "Of course, Mr. Reeves, whatever you need." He quickly glanced at Jessica, who was standing nearby, pale and uncomfortable. Jessica opened her mouth to say something, but she began to stammer instead, feeling more and more flustered. I didn't know. I thought," but before she could finish, the manager cut her off, his voice firm. "Thought what, Jessica? That this customer, who happens to be one of the owners of this restaurant, didn't deserve the same respect as anyone else?" His words were quiet but sharp, making her face turn pale. Jessica started to stumble over her words. "He didn't say who he was and he looked," but she couldn't finish, knowing it would only make things worse. Keanu finally spoke, his voice calm but strong, "It doesn't matter who I am. Everyone should be treated with kindness and respect, no matter who they are or what they look like." The people in the dining room were watching, surprised. Some whispered quietly to each other. One man sitting at a table with his wife whispered, "I knew there was something special about him. He has a presence that's hard to ignore." The woman nodded. "And look at how he handles this, so graceful." The manager turned back to Jessica, looking disappointed. "Jessica, I expect a full explanation from you after your shift. For now, please leave this table and stay away from it. I'll take over." Jessica wanted to argue, but the manager's strong gaze made her stay quiet. Slowly, she turned and left, avoiding the eyes of the other customers. Keanu took a deep breath and stood up. His calm voice filled the room, drawing everyone's attention. This restaurant was built to be a place where everyone feels welcome, no matter how they dress or where they come from. Today that didn't happen. But we can learn from this. The people in the dining room stayed silent, listening carefully. The manager felt a mix of nervousness and respect for how Keanu was handling things. Keanu turned to the staff and continued, "We all make mistakes. But what really matters is what we do after those mistakes. Today we saw the effects of quick judgments, hidden biases, and a lack of empathy. This isn't about punishment, it's an opportunity to do better." Keanu's eyes slowly moved around the room, and they stopped on Jessica, who sat at the back, looking ashamed and near tears. He spoke gently but firmly. "Jessica, I know what happened today was a mistake. But mistakes can be fixed if we're willing to try. What you do next will show who you truly are. He turned to the rest of the staff, his voice softening but still strong. In life, it's easy to judge people based on what they look like, what they wear, or where they're from. But think about this. What happens when you choose to treat someone with kindness? What happens when you look beyond what you see and recognize another person's heart? He stepped forward, putting his hands in his pockets, and continued thoughtfully. Everyone has struggles you can't see. The person who doesn't dress like everyone else might be going through a hard time. The one who seems different could have done more than you imagine. Sometimes a small act of kindness, especially to someone who seems undeserving, might be what changes everything. The staff was quiet, listening carefully. Some looked moved, while others stared at the floor, thinking about their own actions. Finally, Jessica wiped her tears and spoke softly. I never thought about it like that before. I was so focused on the restaurant looking perfect, I forgot what really matters. I forgot that every person, no matter who they are, deserves kindness. Keanu nodded gently, smiling encouragingly. That promise isn't to me, Jessica. To yourself. Real change starts from inside. If you need help, I'm here to support you. She nodded vigorously, a mix of relief and determination on her face. Keanu went on, kindness isn't about big gestures. It's about the small choices we make every day, treating everyone as if they matter because they do. And that's what makes a place kind and special. That's what makes a person truly good. The manager looked at Keanu and said, We'll make sure Lumiere reflects what you want it to be, Mr. Reeves. Thank you for reminding us of that. Keanu smiled and then quietly left the restaurant. The streets of Beverly Hills shimmered under the city lights. He paused on the sidewalk, thinking about what had just happened. This wasn't just about fixing one mistake. It was about creating spaces where everyone feels seen, heard, and valued. And even in difficult moments, there's always a chance to inspire and change. As he walked down the busy street, Keanu thought about what he had said. He wanted everyone to take this lesson to heart. In a world where you can be anything, choose to be kind. True strength isn't in judging others, but in accepting them. And it's in the small choices we make every day that we shape the world and who we are. If you enjoyed this story, share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories. I'll see you in the next video.